The first word in MMK chapter 2 verse 10 is pakṣa, which means side. Pakṣa means side. Pakṣa means wing, as in the wings of a bird, and from that it means side, and it also means view. So it's interesting that the word view and side, taking a view and taking sides, is the same in Sanskrit. In Ashvaghosha's writing, when he talks about when the Buddha teaches Nanda about how to practice friendliness or so-called loving kindness, how to cultivate kindness or friendliness, he says you start svapaksha, with your own side. In other words, you start making a friend of yourself, and then, which should be the easiest, and then gradually work out until eventually you even learn to love your enemies. So pakṣa, then, originally it means wing, and by extension side, and by extension view. And the concluding verse of MMK, the end of chapter 27, says Sarva drishti prahanaya yasa dharma madeshayat. He who taught the true Dharma in the direction towards abandoning all views. Sarva drishti, all views. Prahanaya, dative, in the direction of abandoning, towards abandoning all views. So the word there is drishti, the usual word for view, but pakṣa in this verse also means a view. And so before attacking the verse itself, I thought I'd indulge in a meditation on the meaning of pakṣa, and especially taking sides. This year, 2018, I've been influenced a lot by reading Jordan Peterson's stuff and watching Jordan Peterson's videos, which struck me as being very, very deeply perceptive when I first saw them. And in particular, the chapter of his book where he talks about setting one's own house in order before one criticises the world. And so this year, 2018, has been a year very much. In fact, I'd already begun that process of setting things in order in France in 2017, when a friend of my neighbour's chopped down all the trees that were up there, and then I spent 2 or 3 months just making firewood out of those trees, and then started work on the woodshed, so I had somewhere to put the wood, and I renovated the whole of the shed, and then had some windows spare, so I made this greenhouse where I'm sitting in now, where the melting ice is dripping on me at the present. But it was as part of setting my own house in order, I came to see more clearly. Well, one thing that happened is I realised that in order to set things straight, in order to sort things out, the process often involves making a hell of a mess. That seems to be the way it is, not only in renovating a shed, but also in emotional things, sorting out your family relationships and so on. So that is covered somewhat in what I was going to read out just now, which is a review I wrote on the book Middle England by Jonathan Coe. So I went to school in Birmingham, which was full of very clever people like Lee Child, who wrote the Jack Reacher novels, who was a couple of years above me, and Jonathan Coe, quite a well-known novelist in England, who was a couple of years below me. And Jonathan Coe's book Middle England, it touches, when I read it 2 or 3 weeks ago, it really caused me to reflect on how my life has been a struggle not to take sides. And that's been a recurring theme. I come up across the taking of sides. So when I met Master Dogen's teaching, particularly a chapter of Shobogenzo, chapter called Butsudo, the Buddha's Truth, where Master Dogen very strongly emphasises there's only one Buddha's teaching, and that sectarianism is crap, bullshit, it's poison. He makes that very clear. But so when people proudly declare themselves to belong to the Soto sect and following Master Dogen, it always occurs to me, well, you don't really know Master Dogen's teaching at all. You know, you are proudly identifying yourself as a member of the Soto sect. If you understood Master Dogen's teaching, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't take sides whatsoever. So part of my emotional dislike for the taking of sides is explained in this book review. So I'll just read it out. I submitted it to Amazon.com, but they refused it. They rejected it on the grounds, I think, probably that I had too much personal stuff in there. So here we go. The book is called Middle England by Jonathan Coe. Early on in Middle England, friend asks friend, light-heartedly, jokingly, with regard to personal loyalty, whose side are you on? Towards the end of the book, more darkly, a racist old mother asks her son the same question with regard to Eastern European immigrants. Whose side are you on? Then, most ominously of all, and most convincingly to my ear, an angry feminist daughter commits the sin of certainty in no uncertain terms when she tells her dad, with regard to perceived transphobia, I know whose side I'm on. I found Middle England to be a page-turner, and at the same time a salutary and even a cathartic exploration of what it is to take or not to take sides. I was at school with Jonathan Coe, but I don't remember him. I suspect he remembers me, though, and not in a good way, but rather as, in the words of my best friend at King Edward's, a macho moron. An arrogant macho moron with Aryan looks and a nasty streak. I was captain of the under-16-15 when Coe would have been in the under-15s, except I suppose the effete lover of literature would never have been in the under-15s. In a lunch hour, when I was in the weights room pumping iron, he would have been in the library pushing a pencil. Thus, when I read the Rotters Club years ago, I couldn't help noticing that Jonathan Coe must have modelled the horrible, wimp-despising Ronald Culpeper, at least partly, on my own schoolboy persona. Culpeperian macho pursuits, rugby, then karate, led me from Middle England to the Far East, where, having read books like Zen in the Art of Archery and Zen in the Martial Arts, I went in individualistic pursuit of Zen enlightenment. By degrees, however, I became less interested in gaining Zen enlightenment as previously conceived, and more interested in the Buddha's teaching of the middle. I was therefore interested by the title Middle England, and still more interested on learning that Jonathan Coe's latest book featured the old cast of the Rotters Club. That cast once again included my alter ego, the out-and-out, all-round, irredeemably selfish bastard, Ronald Culpeper. So I downloaded the book onto my Kindle and thereafter struggled to put it down. When I got to the denouement, where the mother's question, "Whose side are you on?" and the angry feminist's conclusion, "I know whose side I'm on," are expressed in earnest, I must admit that tears, in a manner of which old Culpeper would not approve, ran down. My mother, whose father abandoned her in her infancy, was an angry feminist before angry feminism was even a thing. After nearly 60 years of marriage, she was still complaining to me, "You don't know what it's like living with a male chauvinist." The chauvinist in question, my own father, was formerly a high-ranking officer in the notorious West Midlands police force of the 1970s. Think or Google Birmingham 6. He had learned in the South Wales valleys about playing rugby, drinking beer, distrusting outsiders, and traditional methods of police work, in which throwing the local petty criminal down the steps of the police station was generally accepted as due process. Would it be unfair to categorise my father as a racist right-winger? Certainly he seemed to regard former Labour Home Secretary Roy Jenkins, for his liberal naivety, as public enemy number one. And I might once have heard him declare, in a moment of exasperation, "Maybe Hitler was right." And yet, though Jonathan Coe might struggle to believe it of such an apparent Nazi sympathiser, my father, unlike the two-dimensional Culpeper, did have some redeeming features. These included finely honed detective skills, which were useful for identifying wrongdoing, a compassionate streak for the underdog of whatever skin colour, and an appreciation of human frailty. He also had a fierce lifetime devotion to my mother. But that didn't stop them from spending the 90s, 60s and 70s constantly rowing with each other and asking me, in so many words, all through my formative years, "Whose side are you on?" Every reader will judge for themselves whose side the author is on. But he's not on Culpeper's side. That's for damn sure, to borrow a phrase from another King Edward's alumni, Lee Child. In all his books, I suppose, Coe's own bias might remain that of the left-leaning wimp, the sort who espouses universal compassion, except for the likes of Culpeper. If that remained the case, it would be a shame, because the place from which effectively to combat the unduly individualistic far-right ideology of Ronald Culpeper and his well-heeled ilk might not be the resentful left. The place might be, broadly speaking, the resigned centre, or maybe better, the understanding middle. Is Ron Culpeper's nastiness set forever in stone? Or, all being empty, could the next book in the series be a tale of redemption, charting a transformative middle path that takes Ron from hyper-individualism to philanthropic unselfishness? Culpeper's last stand